Hello, it's Jess, and today I am here to talk about my favorite books of the year. First off, I did want to kick off a couple of honorable mentions. I did not include these in my top 10 because they are rereads for me, but I did just want to give a quick shout out to Fruits Basket. I read a couple of volumes of this series this year and I just love Fruits Basket. It is such a cozy, wholesome, beautiful series, and I will continue to shout its praises from the rooftop. It is a series that follows Toru, and she is an orphan and she's camping out in the woods, and then she realizes that she's actually on the Soma family property, and then there is a landslide, so the Soma family ends up taking her in, and she meets some of like the boys of the family who also go to school with her, and then she finds out that the whole family is under a curse. There are some fantastical elements to the series, but it's honestly just about love and human connections and emotions, and it's just so warm and cozy and I love it. And then my second honorable mention is Gideon the Ninth, which has appeared in previous favorite videos, and I wanted to especially highlight Gideon the Ninth because I reread it for the first time this past year, and it went from being a 4-star read to a 5-star read. I loved it. The second experience of that book was even better than the first experience. I cannot recommend that series enough, but I'm not going to talk about it right now. We'll get to it later. Before we get to the actual top 10 list, I did just want to say that I did not rank these books in order at all, other than the top 3. I just have a really hard time ranking books that are so different from each other in like a favorites list. So the top 3 are interchangeable, but they are my top 3 all-time favorite books of the year, even though I still can't decide which one was like my all-time favorite. Like literally it changes on a day-to-day basis. So those 3 are the top 3, but all of these are just in random order up until the top 3. I refuse I refuse to rank these. It's my channel. I can do what I want, and I refuse to rank these. So with that disclaimer, I will say that the first book in my top 10 of the year is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. This book is so whimsical and beautifully written. The entire time I was reading this book, I felt like I was just getting like a hug. It just felt so warm and so inviting. I think this is one of the times where reading the book and watching the film both accent the other and they improve the experience, and I think that goes both ways. So I honestly could not say whether I like the film or the book better. They're both just amazing pieces of art. If you don't know, Howl's Moving Castle follows Sophie, and she runs a hat shop. One day there's this sort of like mistaken identity, and the Witch of the Waste comes in and curses Sophie and turns her into an old woman. Sophie obviously wants to like get rid of this curse so she can go back about her life. So what she decides is that despite the fact that Howl has a terrible reputation, he's supposed to be very evil, he's supposed to like eat girls' hearts, she's like, well, I'm an old lady now, so I don't think he'll want to eat my heart. And so she decides that she's going to go seek out Howl, and maybe he will be able to break the curse on her because he's kind of her only option. And then she gets to Howl's castle, and Howl actually has like a trapped fire demon there, and the fire demon is like, ooh, you're under a curse, girly. So basically, Sophie makes a deal that if the fire demon breaks her curse, she will break his contract to Howl. And so begins this like very whimsical journey. Sophie says that she's Howl's cleaning lady, and Howl also has like a magician's apprentice there. And so it's really just like this little found family group living in Howl's Castle. It is just so cute. My cheeks hurt while I was reading this from smiling so much. Next up, I have The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. This is the third book in the Broken Earth trilogy. I'm so happy I finished this series this year. It is excellent. Honestly, this is a fantasy series that I think everyone should read. It is so creative. Basically, in this world, there are constant natural disasters. And then periodically, there's also what is known as a death season, where there's a natural disaster so big that it almost wipes out humanity. It sets back technology. It devastates the population. At the start of this series, we are starting right at the beginning of a new death season. So it is literally our cast of characters trying to prevent the world from ending. Within this world, there are also magic users, and the magic users are really hated by the general population, and they are also very, very feared, but they're very important because they can help control the earth. So the magic users in this world can like prevent volcanoes from erupting, and they can help with the weather. They can prevent earthquakes, things like that. And so the magic users are integral to society because they prevent death seasons from happening more frequently, but they're also really, really hated. Within this world also, basically all of the magic users are taken from their homes, whether they're willing or not, and they're taken to the capital and in order to be trained in how to use their powers. They don't have a choice in this, and they're really treated like servants. Sometimes they're almost treated like animals, and there's a lot to unpack about it intentionally. The way the magic users are treated has a lot to do with the themes of racism, but in the first book you follow 3 different magic users. One is a young girl that just came into her powers, and she is just starting her training. One is a woman who's in her early 20s, and she has completed her training and is on her first assignment. And then the third is an older woman. I don't remember. I want to say she's in her mid 40s, and she has actually escaped notice. She has been living in hiding in a village and basically just praying that no one figures out that she is one of these magic users, because they would literally kill her. This series is honestly a work of genius. It is magnificent. It is so well plotted. It is so thoughtful. It is just honestly, it's genius. This is a genius series. Like, I don't know how N.K. Jemisin came up with this, because like when you get to the end of it and you're dealing with the world and the magic and the themes and the different characters and the different character relationships, it's genius. It's literally genius, and you should read this series. Next up on the list is Human Acts by Han Kang. This I read very early in the year, I want to say March, and honestly, this is a book that has stuck with me the whole year. I think about this book like at least once a week. It is so beautifully written and so thought-provoking. This is a book that is all about a specific student uprising in Korea. The uprising in here is linked to Korea's bigger like democratic uprising that they had, which is why South Korea is a democracy now. This is basically a snapshot into one protest that happened during this larger political movement. In the 80s, there was a student protest, and the political leader at the time ordered the military to go there. They opened fire on a completely peaceful protest. They killed hundreds and hundreds of people, and it was completely devastating. I will say that there are a lot of content warnings for this book. I think the biggest one is probably just depictions of violence and then depictions of pretty gruesome injuries and dead bodies. This book is quite heavy, and I definitely think you need to go into it in the right mental headspace. And I also think that you should look up a full list of content warnings to make sure that you are prepared for this. This book is also unique because each chapter is told from a different perspective, and they're all linked back to that one day, but it just really shows how different people were affected by this one thing. This book it's so heavy, but it is so very, very moving, and I think if you're in the right mental space for it and if you can handle it, I do recommend it, and I do think that it will stick with you for a very long time. Next up, I have another heavy book, and that is Razor Blade Tears by S.A. Cosby. This is an adult thriller, and it follows Ike and Buddy Lee, who are two ex-cons, and I don't remember how old they are, but I would imagine at least mid-50s. They're not good people. They suck hard. Their sons were both gay, and they were married to each other, and then both of their sons were murdered. The police really don't have any clues about what happened. They're not making any progress in the case, so Ike and Buddy Lee decide that they are gonna go take matters into their own hands. I was on the edge of my seat. I could not put this down. It's so good. There is so much action, and there's so much violence. There's a lot of violence in this book, like a lot. At the heart, this is a revenge story. It is the best revenge story I've ever read in my life, but it is also partly a redemption story. Oh, I should also mention that Ike is black and Buddy Lee is white, but both of them were very, very homophobic to their sons. And what makes this story so compelling is the conversations that Ike and Buddy Lee have, how they are forced to confront the fact that they were shitty dads, that they were both bigoted, that they were bad people who didn't give their sons what their sons needed. And it is about them coming face to face with that part of themselves and trying to work through that part while also trying to work through the deaths of their sons, while also trying to get revenge for what happened to their sons. I want to make it clear that when I say this is about redemption, I don't mean that it is about Ike and Buddy Lee becoming good people. They at no point become good people. It is about them confronting the hatred that they have and trying to figure out how they can be better in the future, even though it's too late for their sons. The personal journey that these characters go on is fantastic. There's so many discussions in here about homophobia. There's also a lot of conversations about the intersectionality of racism and homophobia within like the general population, within the Black and the white community, and how all of those can compound on each other and how people have different experiences. This is another one that I would say look up the content warnings because ooh, there's so much violence. It's a lot. Oh my God, there's so much. And you should also make sure that you're in the right headspace for this, because this is not like a light book. This is not a head empty thriller for escapism. This talks about very, very serious, heavy topics, and they are discussed at length. So just make sure that you are in the right headspace for that. If you watched my 24-hour vampire readathon vlog, you will not be surprised about this next pick, and that is Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Chupeco. I am so happy every single time I think about this book. I feel like Rin Chupeco wrote this book and they were like, Jess, I'm gonna write a book just for you. This follows Remy, who is a vampire hunter. The human city and the human country that Remy lives in are looking to form alliances with two of the vampire factions. Basically, there's like a bunch of different vampire factions and they all have their own leadership, and two of them are like, hey, we're tired of this constant fighting. Let's make a peace treaty. But what really kicks everything off is that there's this new virus going around that is affecting vampires, and it is making them mutate in really, really creepy, disgusting body horror ways. Oh my God, the descriptions were like so disgusting, but like in the best way possible. Like I loved it, but they were so gross. So that's what kind of gets Remy involved in this situation. He ends up meeting the leaders of the two factions of vampires that want peace, and those two leaders are actually engaged to each other, and they're also trying to figure out like what is going on with this viral infection that's going around. So the vampires are obviously very invested in figuring out like what is this virus going around, but the vampire hunters, and specifically Remy, are also very invested, because while normally vampires are just like, you know, normal sentient intelligent creatures, this virus like basically shuts off their brains and turns them into mindless killers with like no discernible motivations other than murder and eating people. So Remy ends up working with the vampires, and it's just the best thing ever. I love it so much. Remy is kind of like a himbo cinnamon roll, and the two vampires basically just like bring him into their relationship. There's so many tropes here. Like, first of all, it is like a gay polyamorous relationship, and like the vampires are kind of like a grumpy sunshine couple, and like Remy meets one of them under very hostile, extenuating circumstances. So there's also like kind of like a hate to love thing going on. Just honestly, one of my favorite relationships of all time. Easily my favorite relationship of the year. I love the three of them together. It is so cute and heartwarming. All three of the individuals in this polyamorous relationship have their own trauma, and you get to watch them heal together, and it's just so sweet. There's also a ton of action in this novel. This is equal parts romance and equal parts action. Like, there is so much that goes on here. It is one of those books that I think hits the perfect line in being both a romance and also a fantasy novel. They have really cool weapons. There's some cool vampire magic in here. There's some cool like alchemy stuff going on. Honestly, Rin Chupeco built an amazing world in this book. I don't know if this is the first book in a series or not. Like, I don't know what their plans are, but if they don't continue, I'm gonna be so sad. I love this book. It is so good. So next up is another book that I just read. It was actually a Christmas present for me. I haven't even filmed my Christmas book haul yet. That is coming soon. But that is Beartown by Fredrik Backman. This is my first Fredrik Backman book. It's a little too early just now to say that Fredrik Backman is a new favorite author because I've only read one of his novels, but he's a new favorite author. He's so good. He's so good at writing. I don't understand like when people don't like his, like, I don't get it. I don't get it if you don't like this book. Here's the thing. I understand it. I'm not bothered by people not liking this book. But I don't understand it. Like, I get it, but I don't understand. I think Fredrik Backman is so good at just writing human experience. I know that sounds so cheesy to say out loud, but it's just true. He wrote so many lines in here that just really resonated with my heart and rang true to like my real life experience. And I just really appreciate it. His writing isn't necessarily flowery, but it's very beautiful. This book follows a very, very small European town, and they are a hockey town. Every single thing in the town revolves around hockey. Before the finals, one of the athletes on the hockey team rapes a girl, and the entire town is just devastated by this. People start taking sides. There is just a lot of fallout, a lot of people questioning their morals, questioning other people's morals. This book is such a nuanced look into rape culture, specifically within athletics, which is something that hits really close to home with me because I have been an athlete for, well, I'm not an athlete now, but I was an athlete for years, and I also was a girl that was on the boys wrestling team because I didn't have access to a girls wrestling team. And while my team treated me so well, I definitely experienced a lot of really negative things while I was a part of that wrestling program. I also was an athletic trainer. I worked with a bunch of different men's teams while I was doing that. And then I've also worked with athletes when I was a personal trainer. So like I understand so intimately the good and the bad that sports brings to us. There is some vile shit in the athletics world, like some absolutely vile shit. I just really loved the nuance that Fredrik Backman wrote into this book and the care that he took building all of the different characters and all of their different motivations and just the humanity that exists in this novel. I thought that it was so well written, and I also thought that it was so respectful. I just can't recommend this enough. Next up, I just have Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. I thought it was a little unfair to put all of the books on this list, but I did love every single book in this series, and honestly, I don't know what my favorite book in this series is. This series is set in the realm of the Elderling, the same as the Farseer trilogy, but this is set in a different country, and it follows a very, very wide cast of characters, but primarily it follows the Vestrit family, who have a live ship, and she is about to quicken. So basically in this world, you can get ships. They're very, very expensive. They're made of wizard wood. When 3 different family members die on the deck of the ship comes to life. They're faster than other ships. Like, they can help navigate. They are very, very valuable to have. So you followed the Vestrit family and then a couple of like other characters that like kind of surround the Vestrit family. And then you also follow a pirate named Kennit whose main goal is to get a live ship. Kennit believes that if he can get a live ship, he will become the king of the pirates. That's like the short version. Honestly, I think that's all you should know going into this series. There's so much in here. If you know Robin Hobb, you know that she is a slow-paced writer. I love her. She is definitely like a comfort author for me, but she's definitely not for everybody. But I really encourage you to give her a try. This series does get quite dark. The Farseer trilogy also got very dark. There's some heavy content in this book, and I do think that you should look up content warnings for the whole series before you go into it. This series is a beautiful story about human relationships. That's what everything in this series boils down to, is how do we treat others and what are the consequences of how we treated others. I think that Robin Hobb is just so masterful at plotting things out. Little tiny things that happen in this first book, like you finally see the actual consequences in the third book of this series. And I think that Robin Hobb is unmatched in character development. Please give Robin Hobb a chance. And I really hope that you like her as much as I do. Okay, so we are in my top 3 books. These won't be a surprise to anybody. And once again, I refuse to pick a top 1. I refuse. Like, you can't make me. Try to make me. You can't. Surprising literally no one, I have Nona the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. So I really can't tell you much about this, but I do have an entire vlog dedicated to rereading Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth, and then reading Nona the Ninth for the first time. It is one of the weirdest series I have ever read in my entire life. I feel like I have summarized it so much at this point this year, but Gideon the Ninth, the first book in this series, kicks off with Gideon, and she is an orphan ward of the Ninth House. She hates her life and she keeps trying to escape the Ninth House, but she is always foiled by her arch nemesis, Harrow. And then one day, Harrow gets invited to participate in this trial in order to become a lictor for the literal emperor of the world, who is also, by the way, God. And lictors are extremely powerful necromancers, and so the emperor needs some new super powerful necromancers, so he invites like the best necromancer from each of the houses to come compete, and Harrow is chosen. But the catch is Harrow needs a swords person, and oh, wouldn't you know it, Gideon has been training her entire life in the sword. So Harrow's like, listen, we hate each other, I don't want to be in the same room as you, but if you come help me get this super powerful position, I will release you from like your contract with the Ninth House. And Gideon's like, yeah, I mean, that's as good as it's gonna get, so sure, why not? And then they get to the location of the trial and shit goes downhill real fast. People start dying, and because there's a bunch of necromancers there, and also because of the history of the location that the trial takes place at, they don't know what's going on. They don't know if it's monsters killing them. They don't know if it's another contestant. They don't know if it's like ghosts. They have no idea what is happening. But it is so weird. It is so interesting. The magic is one of the coolest magic systems I've ever encountered. I really hope that you will give it a try. I hope you like it as much as me. If you don't like it, don't tell me. Next up in my top 3 is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I don't need to say too much about this book for multiple reasons. First of all, everyone has this in their top books of the year. So I I'm sure that there are people who have spoken much more eloquently about this book, but not only that, I also have an entire dedicated vlog just to reading this. Babel follows Robin Swift. He is a Chinese orphan, and he is taken by this professor to be his ward, and then he is trained in all sorts of languages, with the goal being that Robin will attend Oxford University and he will work in the Tower of Babel, and he will be a part of the Translators Institute. So that's like the general idea of this book, but what it is really about is colonization and imperialism and racism and the absolutely devastating effects that those things have on communities, on the general population, and on individuals. And also, this book is about an uprising and how we get to an uprising, and is violence a necessity in order to see change, true, real change within society. This book is beautiful. It is a love letter to language. It is phenomenally written, no notes. It made me ugly cry, like snot, tears, heaving sobs. I love it so much. I genuinely think everyone should read this novel. Okay, we are on the last book of this video, and that is My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. Stephen Graham Jones is one of my favorite authors, and I know that this book has some really mixed reviews, but I love this book. This is an adult horror novel, and it follows Jade, who is a junior or senior, I can't remember, in high school, and she is a massive horror fan. She's kind of like an outcast at her school, and so she uses horror movies as a way to both relate to the world around her, but also as a defense mechanism. Then Jade starts to notice that maybe she's about to live through a horror movie herself. I think the main criticism that people have of this book is that not very much happens for like 60% of the book, and then like the last third of it is just a lot in a very short amount of time, and that is true. The beginning of this book is very slow. The beginning of this book is a lot of being in Jade's head and her wondering, like, is this really happening? Like, am I seeing things as they are? Am I deluding myself about the world around me? And it's very slow and very psychological, and I think it's really creepy in the beginning. I loved that first section. Like, I loved how slow it was. I loved being in Jade's head. Jade is one of my favorite characters of all time. And I loved like the play that Stephen Graham Jones did of, is this happening? Is this not happening? And you just don't really quite know what is gonna go down. I think that this is excellent. I think it is so well done. And I loved it. I loved this book so much. I cannot wait for the sequel to come out. It comes out in February. I am so excited for it. If anything I said about this book sounds interesting to you, I hope you'll give it a chance, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Okay, there you go. This video is way too long. I spent way too much time talking about these books. Those are my favorite books of the year. Those are my top 10. And if you made it this far, I do hope that you will subscribe and let me know what your favorite book that you read this year was. Or if you can't pick, if you also refuse to pick, let me know what your top 10 was. Stay safe this winter, stay warm, stay hydrated, and I will see you in my next video.